Hey everybody, it's Bishop Barron. You can see behind me the wonderful dome of St. Peter's Basilica. It just passed noon on the first day of the conclave. The cardinals will gather beginning in the late afternoon, and they'll go from the Pauline Chapel into the Sistine Chapel. They'll take an oath of secrecy, and then extra omnes, everybody else out. There'll be a brief sort of exhortation by Cardinal Cantalamessa, who was the preacher to the papal household for many, many years. Then he'll leave, and then there'll almost certainly be a vote this afternoon. Almost zero chance that it'll be the deciding vote. Often the first round, they just kind of, they kind of get a feel for the candidates. So likely we're going to get black smoke around 7 p.m. here tonight, and then tomorrow there'll be 4 rounds of voting. So who knows? Maybe tomorrow. My guess is next day. That might be Friday, but we'll see. I've been talking to a lot of the different TV networks about candidates and what are some of the issues and all that. You can look online for those. But I've been thinking too a lot about the papacy from a theological standpoint. I want to share some of those reflections with you now. One of my favorite theologians from the 19th century is a guy named Johann Adam Müller. Died young, like in the 1840s, I think. He was a founder of what they call now the Tübingen School of Catholic Theology. One of his key ideas was this, that every community needs someone who symbolizes the unity of that community. Think of a town needing a mayor, think of a state or a province needing a governor, a country needing a prime minister, president, king. And so in his arguments with Protestants in his home country of Germany, he said, my argument for the papacy is not so much juridical as symbolic. That the whole body of Christ, with all its diversity, and that's legitimate as far as it goes, but the whole body of Christ needs someone who signifies and expresses the unity of the whole community, and that's the Pope. And I've often thought he's dead right about that, and it's maybe the key task of the Pope. Not so much doing all the nitty-gritty of the life of the church, but of, in his own person, summing up and symbolizing the unity of the church. That's why I think it's never a good idea for a pope to belong to a faction or be overly identified with left or right or center. He's supposed to be someone in whom the entire church finds its unity. I think of Müller a lot in my own task as bishop of a diocese, so on a much smaller scale, obviously, but I'm the sign of unity for the entire diocese of Winona-Rochester. If I was siding clearly with, one faction within the diocese, that would be problematic. So that's, I think, maybe the most important way to get at the task of the Pope. The second person I've been thinking about a lot is my favorite theologian from the 20th century, and that's Hans Urs von Balthasar. He wrote a great book on St. Peter and the office of the church. Balthasar, and following here Newman in many ways, said there are 3 great expressions of the church's life. There's the Johannine. That's associated with St. John the Apostle, who rested on the breast of Jesus. The Johannine is the mystical, the spiritual, the liturgical, the prayerful life of the church. Think of the Mass, think of monks praying, think of someone praying a rosary on her own. All that's expressive of the Johannine or mystical element of the church. There's also, he said, the Pauline, associated here with St. Paul the Apostle. This is the part of the church that teaches and preaches and goes out, as Paul did, to the wider culture. Word on Fire is very much a Pauline ministry in that sense. It's teaching and preaching, evangelizing, and going out to meet the culture. And then finally, he says there's the Petrine office, the office of Peter. What's that? That's the role of governance in the life of the church, the one who orders the charisms of the whole church. One way to think about that is the Petrine kind of orders the Johannine and the Pauline and makes sure that they kind of keep in right balance and tension. But it's the role of governance in the church. Well, there's the Pope, the successor of Peter. He's the supreme governor of the church. I'd put it this way, the supreme orderer of the charisms of the church. This is interesting to me. Both Newman and Balthasar see this, that each of the offices has a characteristic shadow side. So let's say you hyper stress the Johannine, right? The mystical, the prayerful. The danger there is a kind of superstitious, simple-mindedness maybe. When you bracket too much the rational side of religion, the danger is superstition. The Pauline, now flip it around, the danger there is a sort of rationalism. Think of someone who's become very secularized, that they're so interested in the wider culture that they've lost a sense of their own Catholic identity. There was actually a fair amount of that when I was coming of age in the church, a hyper stress on the Pauline. Well, by the same token, a hyper stress on the Petrine, the church becomes petrified. It becomes too rocky, if you want. It means too rigid, too locked in place. The ordering of the charisms, yes indeed. Sign and symbol of unity, yes indeed. But if there's too much authority, then the other two offices kind of get shut down. I've always found that a very helpful way to think about the life of the church. The Pauline, the Johannine, and the Petrine. Well, then Balthasar adds, and this is very important, underneath all three of them, operating as a kind of matrix indeed, is the Marian function. Mary, who said fiat, right, let it be done, that all three expressions must be conditioned by a basic obedience to the Spirit. Let it be done to me. Think about that, everybody, as you reflect upon the papacy. We're going to elect tonight or tomorrow or the next day the successor of Peter, the supreme governor of the church, the order of the charisms, and the one who in his own person sums up the unity of the church. I think that's what this office is all about. And God bless you.